Hello, everyone. First shiur is sponsored for 2024-2025 academic year by the Verntetal and Sanon families in memory of Mel and Sylvia David, Zichronam Livracha, Menachem Mendel ben Avraham Meir, Tzivi Chaya v'Toiva Rivka Zal, Bat Aryeh Lev v'Chava Idol, Zichronam Livracha, שיהיה בעזרת השם לעילוי נשמה. Okay, so we continue with our long journey. That now, I think by the end of the journey, no one will have Soshits. I think I even stole mine from one of you, so I apologize in advance. Okay, hold on to it. I think it's more precious than diamonds. I don't know. I think we had 80 of them and we barely have 10. So it's like stamps. Collect them. So hopefully, when we finish, we will have it, or we don't. Okay. So we are just ending with Rav Aviner, who is Rosh Yeshivat Ateret Yerushalayim and the Rav of the Yeshuv of Bet El, who basically had some kind of similar opinions to Rav Dessler that we read. And we obviously questioned some of his remarks, as you remember. But we are really at the end, where it says, Ma be'emet b'pasuk. I don't know what page is it, because there are no page numbers. So it looks like that. It's before Rav Bazak. Most of you don't have it, so you don't really need to care. So, okay, so Mimela, it's in Hebrew, so you will rely on me on translating. Okay. So he says, ממש at the end, he says, אכן, ישנם שתי שיטות לימוד בלימוד תנ"ך. There are two approaches when you learn תנ"ך. יש שיטה אוניברסיטאית. There is it's a university approach, academic approach, כאשר המלומד ניצב בפני קושי בפסוק, משליך בו ממחשבותיו. When you confront a challenge in the pasuk or a difficulty in the pasuk, you basically try to impose or to throw on that pasuk your own thoughts. He says, זה מעניין מאוד, it's really interesting, אבל זה לא הפסוק. But this is not what the true meaning of the pasuk, אלא פירוש מאוד מעניין שיאפשר לנו לבצע חקר אופיו של הפרשן. It's an interesting interpretation that will allow us to know something about the commentator or whatever. But this is not the pasuk. השיטה שלנו, התורה שבעל פה, מוסרת לנו מה שיש באמת בכוונת הפסוק. The Torah שבעל פה, our sages are giving us really the true meaning of the pasuk. כיצד היא יודעת? כי לכותב היו תלמידים והוא הסביר להם כוונותיו. גם לתלמידים היו תלמידים וכן עד סוף כל הדורות. Because the Rabbi taught it to the students and the students taught it to their students, and this is the tradition, this is the Masorah, that's what we know, that's what we have, this is the truth. תנ"ך בגובה העיניים? כן. להגביה את העיניים גבוה למעלה למעלה. You want to talk to me about תנ"ך בגובה העיניים? No. בגובה העיניים, you need to what? Lift your eyes and see these biblical figures as semi-angels. Okay, so that's Rav Aviner in his interpretation. Okay. I think we said enough about the criticism that we have on his analysis. We understand where he's coming from. We also understand the danger and the risk in the other approach. But now, take a look at Rav Bazak. Rav Amnon Bazak is a Tanakh teacher, a very good Tanakh teacher. What? Okay, he's an excellent Tanakh teacher. Rav Amnon Bazak. And but that's not fair. What we did now, it's not fair. Right now. We didn't say...
Rav Aviner is a fantastic teacher.
Oh, good. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Since 1974, 5. Okay. I do remember from last week. So, I want to treat him with the same criticism and the same analysis like we did to Rav Aviner. Okay? It will take a little bit more from us because we are got so used, especially in our quote-unquote bubble, to analyze Tanakh in the way he suggests. But we need to be careful and we need to open our mind to criticism as well. Okay? So, okay. בשבועות האחרונים, in the last weeks, אנו עדים לליבוי מחדש של אש המחלוקת סביב דרכי לימוד התנ"ך בדורנו, על ידי רבנים מחוג מסוים. says recently we are aware of again a machloket regarding how to learn Tanakh, especially from rabbis from a very specific sector. למרבה הצער, unfortunately, מחלוקת זו מלווה בצדדים שליליים רבים. This dispute is accompanied by many negative connotations and aspects. אולם, לאחר שיעיין מסכת תענית דף כ עמוד א', צדדים שליליים ומזיקה, מה קורה פה? יש מקום לחזור ולחדד את נקודות המחלוקות האמיתיות ולהציג באופן ברור את ההשקפה שכנגדה יצאו רבנים מסוימים באופן כה תוקפני. So basically, this is really a reflection of what was going on in the newspapers here, and that was really a major dispute between people who supported the idea of learning Tanakh begova einayim, which means we understand it's Tanakh, it's biblical figure, but still there were people, quote unquote, like us, and we need to learn from their mistakes and to the way they overcame it. And then you had the other camp who says, what are you doing? You are basically dismissing and diminishing and you lowering the biblical figures, and you are destroying Tanakh and you're destroying religion to some extent, the Hashkafa. So he says, you know what, let's try to clarify what are the issues. So, תחילה, first, אציין שקשה להגדיר באופן אובייקטיבי את שני הצדדים המרכזיים במחלוקת. He says, objectively, it is a bit hard for me to identify and to clarify exactly the two sides of the dispute. משום כך, נראה לי שהדרך הפשוטה ביותר תהיה להגדיר צד אחד כגישת הקו, המבטא את מה שמקובל בציבור הדתי לכנות ישיבות הקו ובראשן ישיבת הר המור ורבניה. So on one hand to say, okay, ישיבות הקו, what is a קו? A line, okay? So basically הר המור and its rabbis and all the sub ישיבות of הר המור, ואת הצד השני להגדיר כגישת המרחב הכוללת רבנים ממגוון רחב של ישיבות ומלמדי תנ"ך, and the other side is, they called it גישת המרחב. מרחב is what? It's a broad, and it's not in terms of how many you have on that side or how many you have on that side, because sometimes you can find a rabbi from here who belongs to there and a rabbi from there who belongs to that camp. So he called it גישת המרחב, that has different types of rabbanim and Tanakh teachers who are God-fearing people, שאינם שותפים לתחושה שיש רק קו אחד לגיטימי במחשבת ישראל, that they do not share the feeling that there is only one way to think. אני מקווה מאוד שהגדרות אלו אינן פוגעות באף אחד משני הצדדים. And I hope that I just didn't insult anyone who was in this camp or the other. אוקיי, נו בסדר. מהן אפוא נקודות המחלוקת המרכזיות? What are the major points of contention? דומני, I think, שניתן לדבר על שלושה תחומים מרכזיים. I think we can talk about three major areas. One, הלגיטימיות ללימוד הפשט ולפרשנויות חדשות בו. The legitimacy to what? To learn pshat, like the simple meaning of the pasuk without any interpretations, and then to the new interpretations, which means if I get a pasuk, you know what? This is the famous one. Let me try it on you. How do you understand? ויקח מאבני המקום ויעשה מראשותיו. That Yaakov took the stones and he put it under his head, right? Why?
Because one is plural and the other is singular.
No, ויקח, he took מאבני המקום, from the stones around himself.
And he took one stone.
אחרי זה, no, רגע, she's right. After he did it, אבן, it says אבן, right? So now, I want you to, רגע. What? Forget kindergarten, okay? That's it. Kindergarten is over. Now, we are adults. Okay, so, ויקח מאבני המקום, and then וישם את האבן. Okay, so, אבני, plural, and then there is אבן. And if I read the pasuk in a very simple way, okay, no kindergarten, no Rashi, no nothing, how would you explain the change from plural to singular? What would you say?
from the
He
stone.
took one of many.
A stone from the stone.
Okay, one option is very simple. He collected few stones together, and then he chose one which was the most, you can understand, it's not that comfortable to put your head on a stone. Okay, so he took the best stone to put on his head on, zehu. Or he took avanim ktanot, avnei hamakom, little stones, collected them together, and created for himself a nice pillow, which was one stone. None of what I suggested to you is what you were taught in kindergarten. Right? Okay.
Kindergarten was too long ago, please.
I just gave you a compliment, so that's not good either. Okay. So the idea is what? Is that we can come with interpretations that can explain the pasuk. Rashi Rashi, the famous one, he quotes a midrash that talks about the dream of the 12 children and to make them one nation and all of that. Now, this is beautiful. But you know that this is not the pshat. Oh, for example, it's a bit of a joke, so don't take it too seriously. What kind of kippah Yaakov wear when he left Israel? What's wrong with you? No kippah whatsoever. Okay, so obviously when you go to the kindergarten, if it's a good kindergarten, yes, so they tell you that he wore a kippah, vayetze Yaakov, vayatza bli kippah, v'day sheyatza im kippah. The idea is that some of the interpretations that we have became almost like part of the psukim. And people sometimes even forget to distinguish between what's the pshat, what's the pasuk. However, when he talks about pshat, you can understand that my pshat is not your pshat, because my pshat is based on my knowledge already. And your pshat is based on your own knowledge. Which means even in the ramata pshat, in the level of the pshat, you can also have a variety of pshatim. Now, the only question is, who are you open enough to tolerate or to even encourage new pshatim, new levels of understanding that did not exist before you? If you, for example, take Rashi and his grandson, Rashbam, Rashi does not interpret the Torah based on pshat, mostly. He mostly quotes what? Midrashim. And he tells you that. Now, why he chose this midrash and not the other, why sometimes he edit the midrash, different questions. The Rashbam, the Ibn Ezra, they look more on what they called pshat. And I will tell you, and it's very interesting. I mean, it's not interesting. I know why Rav Aviner did not quote it. I understand where it's coming from, but I think that you should quote everything, even if it doesn't fit your ideology. Rashbam, who was Rashi's grandson, and Ibn Ezra, who was in the 11th century, he said many times he gives an interpretation based on pshat, and then it says, this is the pshat, veze noged divrei rabotenu. And that contradicts what our sages said. However, this is the pshat. Now, what our sages told us, if it's part of halacha, im halacha nekabel. That's the phrase. If it's halacha, I'm accepting it. Even though the interpretation does not go according to what? To what they say. And that's fine. I can live with it. No, not right now. I have the what? No, ayin tachat ayin ze mamon. Okay, you know what? That's like even though I'm not sure that the Ibn Ezra says about that dafkei malacha nekabel, but ayin tachat ayin. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, what is ayin tachat ayin? Eye for an eye, which means what? Mamash, eye for an eye, right? But there Chazal comes along and say you can't understand it by the pshat. Why? Do you know why? Very good. Because if I beat you up and I took your eye out, and I'm already have only what? Only one eye. So if you will take my other eye, I'm becoming totally blind. I'm eyeless. And you already have, and you have one eye. I took one. So you have one eye, right? So it's not fair. So because everything is what? It should be fair, measure against measure. So we need to say it's mammon. So because of the chance of 1% or 2%, but definitely not the majority, of if there is a case that someone with one eye took someone else's eye, and you can't what? Take his eye. So you're going to say that ayin tachat ayin is mammon. Money. Little hard, right? Little hard. By the way, I always had an issue with that because I'm deviating for a second, okay? I always had an issue with this drasha because we know, for example, when it comes to edim zomemim, conspiring witnesses, you remember the conspiring witnesses? What do you do to the conspiring witnesses? Whatever they wanted to do to me, I'm doing to them. However, there is a problem. Let's say they came along and testified that I'm a Cohen. I'm not. That I'm a Cohen and I married a Grusha, which means that my children are not mamzerim, chas v'shalom. They're not Kohanim, they're Chalalim. Now they are being conspired, but they are not Kohanim. So you can't do that to them. So what do? That's the first Mishnah in Masechet Makot. You give them Malkot. This is the first Mishnah in Masechet Makot, which talks about Edim Zomemim, and instead of talking about Ka'asher Zamam, they are talking about what do you do when you can't do that. Okay, which it's very interesting. So what do? You give Makot. So you didn't change the entire Edim Zomemim because of that issue. What's the percentage of Edim who trying to conspire to tell me that my kids are not Kohanim to a guy with one eye taking your eye? Probably the same percentage. But you see that what? That here you changed the drasha, and here you didn't change the drasha. Okay? So drashot Chazal bichlal are very creative, and also there is not necessarily consistency that we understand. I'm not saying that there is none, but that I was able to understand all the time with every drasha. Okay, now. So the first point of debate between the two approaches is the legitimacy. Do we have a legitimacy to learn pshat and to come up with new interpretations? Second, ההיצמדות לפרשנות מסוימת בחז"ל ובמפרשים מול היכרות עם גישות שונות ומורכבות. So also the balance between knowing what Chazal suggested in the Midrashim, in the Talmud and everything else, versus other approaches, which might be a little bit more complicated approaches towards how to read the psukim. And the last one, ולבסוף, היחס לחקר המקרא האקדמי, התמודדות רצינית או התעלמות וזלזול. How do we deal with what? With the academic analysis of Tanakh. Do we dismiss it? Or we deal with it seriously? What do I mean by that? Who wrote the last 8 psukim of the Torah? Who said Yehoshua? Yehoshua. Oh. One opinion says it was Moshe. That's the Gemara in Baba Batra. He wrote it before he died, so he knew exactly how many days they're going to mourn for him, and they will all cry. Only half of them will cry. Okay, now who wrote Vaish Moshe Anav Meod? Okay, you got me, right? Now, this is not from the academia. This is from Gemara in Baba Batra. Okay? Which means the sages already realized that there is a problem. Okay? Rav Soloveitchik's famous essay about Adam A and Adam B comes from where? You read Perek Aleph Bereshit and you read Perek Bet Bereshit and you ask yourself, what's going on here? Okay, what kind of Adam? Adam מהאדמה או יציר אלוקים? This is simple. Those are simple things. Now, let alone, what do you do with psukim which says something like along the lines of ad etzem hayom hazeh, until today? Today? What are you talking about? It doesn't exist. Okay? So we have issues that we can come up without going to the department of Tanakh in any other university. Especially now when you go to university and you learn Tanakh, this is, by the way, where many of our students are being shocked. When they hear the questions and the analysis, the academic analysis, they don't have the tools to deal with it. Because we try to say that there are no contradictions. Think about it. That's what we always try to do. Yes, question? There's a question? We have an answer. and we don't let them live with the question, and we don't give them tools to deal with other questions. That's a problem. Okay, but now, not trying to highlight all the problems, let's talk about some of the issues. So basically, what they call bikoret hamikra, biblical criticism, did not start 21st century and did not started at the 20th century. Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman, for example, wrote his Perush on the Torah, and he mentions many times what we call today bikoret hamikra, and he mentioned the people who are leading bikoret hamikra, and he's trying to deal with them. And why? Because after emancipation, and after Jews becoming now more and more sophisticated, they read the psukim in a different way, and it's very easy to what? To turn them against the Tanakh. So he is trying to what? To prove that they were wrong, or even take their opinion. And he says, but you can look at it in a different way, and sometimes use them in order to prove the authenticity of the Torah, which is it's fascinating. I don't know, how many of you read Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman? Not read, like learn. Okay, you should. You really should. What? Okay, so each one of you can buy a book and bring your book, and I don't need to send copies. I'll do it. Okay, very good. It will be easy. It's Radatz Hoffman al Torah. I don't think there is a name. I mean, that's the way I read it. I read it online. Okay, Perush al Torah. So he and others, also Shadal, David Luzzato, and also try to deal with it. Now, we obviously have some people who can say, look, I totally dismiss everything that comes from the academia. How can I learn from someone, a professor in the Tanakh department, who does not wear a kippah, does not put on tefillin? He has no right. You are nice. He has no right to learn it. And even more so, he has no right to what? To teach it. And I shouldn't learn from him. He comes from a different world. This is not the musagim. It's not the same expressions, the same understanding of Tanakh. I shouldn't learn from him. Okay. So this is the third issue. What do you do with it? Okay. נקודת המחלוקת המרכזית ביותר היא בשאלת הלגיטימיות ללימוד הפשט. He says the main issue of debate is the legitimacy of learning pshat. גישת הקו, the approach of קו, which is ישיבת המור and others. By the way, just as a side note, the Haredim did not talk much here in that debate, and you know why? They don't teach Tanakh, which is very interesting. They don't teach Tanakh in yeshivot. In yeshivot Harediyot, there is no learning of Tanakh. There's always this joke that if you want, a more of a Haredi yeshiva guy to quote a pasuk, he will quote you the daf in the Masechet that quoted the pasuk, which sometimes, by the way, it's not the right pasuk, or the drasha comes from what? From the second part of the pasuk and not the first part of the pasuk. What was it? No, come on. Shmuel Al. Yeah. So everyone who knows how to learn Gemara understand that when they quote a pasuk, it's probably better to what? To look at the pasuk and to understand also the connotation. Okay, now.
But they don't.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. They are not weighing in. It's between Yeshivot HaKav and the Gishat HaMerchav.
You mean conventional yeshivot?
No, it's Yeshivot. Some of them are Yeshivot Hesder, and some of them are Yeshivot Gvorot for the Tzioni Dati, but they are more what we call today in a very political way, so I'm sorry. More of what we call Chardal.
Which means?
Not mustard. Haredi Dati Leumi, which has, like, they are more to the
Like
right.
modern Orthodox yeshivas. This would be an American term.
Yeshivish Tzioni. That sounds good. I don't know. Yeshivish Tzioni. I don't know. No, it's not yeshivish. It's I don't know. I don't know how to define it.
It's a little bit not so.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but she's asking the definition for yeshivat hakav. What does it mean? So I don't know what to explain. Look, it's hard to explain what is modern Orthodoxy and what is religious Zionism. Okay, so if you take religious Zionism, okay, so you have what we will call yeshivot Bnei Akiva, no, ישיבות הסדר, ריש, משהו כזה, and then you have ישיבות גבוהות, who are more like what I will call רב קוק, מרכז הרב, ישיבת הר המור, and things like that, okay? Even though רב קוק, whatever, complicated, okay, move on, I'm moving on, okay. Ask ChatGPT, זהו. גישת הקו שוללת למעשה את העיסוק הישיר בפרקי התנ"ך, גם מצד לומדים שהקדישו שנים רבות ללימוד זה, ויוצאת כנגד פרשנות חדשה שאין לה בסיס במדרשים או ברש"י. This approach basically says you have no right and you have no legitimacy to deal with the pshat with your own interpretations unless it's what? It's anchored in midrashim and Rashi. You can come up with your own things. לעומת זאת, on the contrary, גישת המרחב, the approach of the other approach, the second approach, מבוססת על המסורת הפרשנית לדורותיה, שלפיה לכתוב יש כמה מובנים. The other approach deals with the narrative, with the tradition that we have, that every pasuk has different connotations. שאחד מהם הוא רובד הפשט. And one of these multiple layers is the pshat, the simple understanding. והפשט תלוי בהבנתו המעמיקה של הלומד בכל דור. And we believe that what? That the pshat is based on the person who learned it in every generation. רבים מן המפרשים הקדישו את עיקר עבודתם לפרשנות על פי רובד הפשט. תקצר היריעה מלפרט את המקורות השונים שבהם ראשונים הציגו את משנתם בנושא זה, ולכן נסתפק בדוגמאות ספורות. So he is going to what? Now to try to illustrate through the generations different examples of parshanim who decided that they are going to what? To explain the pasuk based on the pshat that they see in the pasuk. Okay. אחד המקורות הידועים ביותר בנושא הוא דברי הרשב"ם בתחילת פרשת וישב. One of the most famous statements is Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, Rashi's oldest grandson, who in his commentary in פרשת וישב, he says the following, he says, המספר על הוויכוחים שהיו לו עם סבו הפרשן הגדול רש"י. This is fascinating. Okay, so the grandson says, those are my debates with my grandfather. Who was your grandfather? רק רש"י. Okay? Yeah, I guess so. Okay. וגם רבינו שלמה, who is רבינו שלמה? רש"י, רבי שלמה יצחקי, אבי אמי, my mother's father, which means my grandfather, מאיר עיני הגולה, he illuminates the eyes of the Jews in exile, שפירש תורה, נביאים וכתובים, that he explained Torah, נביאים וכתובים, נתן לב לפרש פשוטו של מקרא. He wanted what? To try to explain פשוטו של מקרא, ואף אני שמואל, רשב"ם, רבי שמואל בן מאיר, חתנו, ז"ל, נתווכחתי עמו. Argued with him. No, argued. נתווכחתי. No, argued is good. Back then, in the 11th century and 12th century, there was no politically correct. So that was נתווכחתי. ולפניו, והודה לי. What is הודה לי? He agreed, he admit to me, שאילו היה לו פנאי, that if he would have time, he was a little busy, the entire Shas, Tanakh, and everything else, והתשובות, שאילו היה לו פנאי, היה צריך לעשות פירושים אחרים, לפי הפשטות המתחדשים בכל יום. He would rewrite some of the פירושים, or he would write new פירושים based on the new interpretation that he has every day.
This is written in Rashbam in the beginning of Vayeshev?
Yeah, open it up.
No, Rashi said he would do that.
The grandson says that his grandfather told him that that's what he would do. I think that's a good summary of why. Yeah, you're correct. This is a testimony of Rashbam saying what his grandfather said, which means Rashi lived between 1040 to 1105. He died in 1105. Rashbam, when Rashi died, Rashbam was probably around 20, 22 years old. So he definitely argued with Rashi, he learned with Rashi, not Rabbeinu Tam didn't. So Rashbam is basically testifying that what? That here Rashi in the 11th century in France says what? You look at the pasuk and every day you can basically come up with what? With new ideas in the pasuk. גישתו של רש"י הייתה אפוא שהפשט הוא דבר מתחדש. Rashi's approach based on that was that the pshat is something that you can renew every day. ופירושים חדשים עשויים להתגלות בכל יום. And new interpretations can be revealed or can be exposed every day. בכמה מקומות לאורך פירושו של רש"י הוא אכן הגשים את דבריו שלו. Some commentaries of Rashi, he really fulfilled his understanding, and what did he do? תיקן ושינה בכתב ידו את מה שכתב בתקופה קודמת בחייו. He changed his פירושים. Based on what? Based on new understandings. How do we know that? יפה מאוד. We have many manuscripts of Rashi's פרשנות על התורה. If you want, this is not even an academic, this is not even an academic website. You can go. It's called על התורה. על התורה, ALHATORAH, על התורה. Go to מקראות גדולות. That's the website. It's called על התורה. Go on על התורה. Wonderful website. You go, click on מקראות גדולות, בראשית, לא משנה. מפרשים רש"י. And then you click on Rashi, there is a little like a sign there, and it gives you different manuscripts. And then compare them. Sometimes there is just one word. בסדר, Aleph, Hey. But sometimes you can see what? One sentence is not there, or there is an additional sentence. And that itself is fascinating. That's A. B. Professor Galinsky in Bar Ilan now is teaching a course which is very interesting, and he was not the first one. Grossman and many others dealt with that. Is can you find hashkafa in Rashi's interpretations that deal with what we call the debate against the Christians? Rashi lived in the 11th century in France, very Christian country. Crusaders started in Germany in 1096, and then they made their way to France as well. The fact that Jews were surrounded by Christians and by Christian theology is not a secret. The question is, was Rashi or any other commentator tried to say something in his parshanut that reacts to what? To their claims or to something that was an inner Jewish issue versus Christian issue. And this is the second layer, meaning after you, and you need to see all the manuscripts. Why do you need to see the manuscripts? Because it might be that A, he changed his mind, but also it might be that some of them were what? Censored. Okay, so that's a very interesting thing by itself. Okay, now let's go back to our issue. תלמיד חבר של רש"י, רבי יוסף קרא. רבי יוסף קרא was his colleague, Rashi's colleague. הרבה לעסוק בפשוטו של מקרא, so he did a lot of פרשנות פשט, ובכמה מקומות ביטא עמדה ייחודית, and in some places he expressed a very unique approach, ולפיה, and according to that approach, הפשט הוא הרובד החשוב ביותר של לימוד התנ"ך. The pshat is the most important component of learning Tanakh, שכן בלימודו ניתן להגיע להבנה ישירה בלתי אמצעית עם דבר השם. Because by understanding the pshat, you understand God's will directly from you, not through a midrash, not through something else. הוא כותב, והט אוזנך וכפוף עצמך למקרא. What does that mean? Listen carefully. What is כפוף עצמך? Bend down to the narrative. Submit yourself to what? To the narrative, to the pshat. And he says, שכל מקרא ומקרא שדרשו רבותינו, בטוב תנין נפשם. משאמרו עליו מדרש הם שאמרו עליו לסוף אמרו, אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו. Rashi says it many times. Meaning he brings a drash, and the drash says A, B, and C, and at the end of the day, Rashi says, אבל אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו. What does that mean? אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו. What does that mean? Mm-mm. The simplest explanation is always there. The midrash, you can give a midrash, I can give a midrash, this guy can give a midrash, everyone can give a midrash. Not everyone, but you can. But at the end of the day, you cannot. The pasuk still has its own basic meaning. For example, I'll give you one. Oh, that's an easy thing to do. ולבן שיניים מחלב. מה זה לבן שיניים מחלב? Very good. When you drink milk, your teeth will be white. Do you remember the Gemara about לבן שיניים מחלב? גדול המלבין שיניו יותר ממשקהו חלב. Meaning, when someone who needs money and you don't have, you just smile to him, you show him לבן שיניים, you show him white teeth, that's better than what? Giving him milk. Now, I'm not sure if they asked the poor guy, he's still thirsty. But that's what the Midrash says. But that's אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו, meaning there is a Midrash to the pasuk, but the pasuk itself still says what? Clean teeth or white teeth, drink milk. I don't think it's woke, but whatever. Yeah, you can try. Yes.
You interpret the pasuk. The first one you gave us of Even Mirasha Torah. Now I learned, and whenever you said that, that's what clicked in my mind. That the Rosh is the head, but I also learned that Yaakov was connecting Even, Bein, and Nechet to his Rosh, to his forefathers. Rosh Hashanah, those who came before him. Now that's what I was thinking, but that doesn't change any halacha. That doesn't change any midah, except maybe that you're supposed to look back to the other generations. So, is there any danger in that? I don't know who said that, by the way. It's not original, but I did learn it.
Okay.
And it's beautiful.
Very good. So the question is, let's say I don't look at the simple understanding of the pasuk, but I'm using this midrash, and this is for me. This is what the pasuk means. It doesn't cause any harm. I agree, but at the same time, I want you to respect the other side who says this midrash is wonderful, but really that's not the explanation of the pasuk.
What's the explanation of the pasuk? He took a rock and put it under his head?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, why can't you add to it? It makes it more beautiful.
You can add wonderful from now until tomorrow. But my question is, what's the pshat of the pasuk? And by the way,
You're not denying that.
no, I'm not denying, but I'm saying do not reject the other one. And now you ask me, I thought you're going to ask me, okay, if it doesn't mean that he took, the Av Ben Veneched and he put it and he connected to the head. So why does the Torah need to tell me that he put his head on a stone? למה אכפת לי? מה אכפת לי? He brought this thing, when you fly the airport, the thing on your neck. Why do I care where he put his head on? Right? Based on what you are telling me, יש לזה משמעות. There is meaning to it. Based on what I said, what's the משמעות? I'll give you.
That if your mom gives you a stone to sleep on, don't complain. Yaakov slept on it.
Okay. Good. I can tell you something very simple. Yaakov is leaving the country, and the Torah wanted to say that he left the country with nothing. כי במקלי עברתי את הירדן הזה, ועתה הייתי לשני מחנות. רגע, שנייה. But everything is based on, I'm talking about now, pshat. Why would the Torah tell me that he put his head on the stones? Answer, he had nothing. They wanted to show that he was klum. And all the brachot that he stole, nothing happened with him. That's building, and this is only on narrative, there's no midrash. And also, because Yaakov felt already that he's going to be exiled, he's going to be tough, so he put his head not on a nice pillow with feathers, he put his head on a stone. וזהו. זהו. Or, I can tell you another pshat. This is that Yaakov had obsessions with stones. He did. I'm not joking. He had the Galed, he removed the stone from the well, משם רואה אבן ישראל, and this is all the idea of the stone. Now, why? So I know. Evan, Av Ben Veneched, he created the family. I use this midrash many times under chupot. But if they didn't ask me for pshat, they asked me for midrash. So, but the pshat, why Evan? Because what is an Evan? It's like an Evan ma'asu abonim, הייתה לו ראש פינה. It's a cornerstone. So something, if I want to show something that is solid, that it's strong, I'll use a stone. זה הכל. Sorry for bursting your bubble. Now, but I do not reject what you said. I said I think it's beautiful. You can use it whenever you think fit. But don't tell me, I know that you are, but don't tell me that I cannot, what? Look at the pshat like that. I didn't become less religious or less ma'amin because I don't want to take that midrash. I want to give my own pshat. Yes.
What about the whole story, Midrash, about Abraham and his 10, trials and furnace and all that? That's not in the narrative.
Oh, so this is a little bit of a different question. Your question is very good. What do you do when with midrashim that basically are filling up the blanks? Which means they're not even blanks. They are inventing something that does not exist in the narrative. Okay, I'll say it on your behalf. Which means it's not even there. Where in the narrative it says that Abraham was thrown into the furnace? It says Ur Kasdim. Ur, Esh, fire. Kasdim, there was some kind of fire. Now, I can tell you that Ur Kasdim has nothing to do with Ur, Esh, but rather that was the name in Aramaic or in Ashurit or in, I don't know, whatever language, Kasdit, and that the name, instead of naming it Tel Aviv, they called it Ur Kasdim. They are called. It has nothing to do with fire. But we have other psukim in Tanakh that says that Hashem bachan, that Hashem tested Avram. Okay? And we do know that there were few tests. Lech lecha. Right? That's definitely a test. Vashem nisa et Avraham, the Akedah, the last one. Egypt, going to Egypt, famine, risking his wife.
Those weren't tests, those were trials.
I don't know. Nisayon, where it says Nisayon, can be different things in the Hebrew. Nes can be like a flag, like to lift you up. Can be Nisayon, a trial, and it can be also as a test. So it will be hard with the English and the Hebrew. The Hebrew word for Nes can contain many, I think almost all of them. But the question, let's go back to the question, what do we do with Midrashim that when you read the Psukim, they do not exist? So what you do, and this is, I'm not giving Shur Midrash now. When you learn Midrash, you need to learn where is the anchor in the Pasuk for such a Midrash. They didn't invent it totally. It's not the Agadot HaAchim Grimm. Hey, it's not the Grimm brothers fairy tales, okay? This is something that is based on what? On Mashu B'Pasuk. So for example, I'll give an example. There is a Midrash, and that's it, and then we'll go back. I need to address that question. It's a good question. After what Shimon and Levi did to Shechem, the Midrashim says that there was a big war. Big war. Everyone attacked Yaakov. And Yaakov davened to Hashem, and Hashem threw arrows and all sorts of things, and they killed their enemies. ויהי חיטת אלוקים על הערים, ולא רדפו אחרי בני יעקב. The Pasuk says what? That they didn't chase them. The Midrashim says what? Exactly the opposite. And in the narrative itself, there is nothing about any war between Yaakov and his family against the other nations. Where did they get it from? Later on, in Parshat Vayechi, our Parsha, Yaakov says to Yosef what? I'm giving you Shechem echad al achecha, asher lakachti, becharbi ubekashti. I'm giving you Shechem, the city, Shechem, that I took, becharbi, with my sword, ובקשתי, with my arrow. The rabbis asked themselves a question. What's the question? What is he talking about? We never saw that Yaakov took a city with his arrow and his sword. Then the Midrash comes along and says, there was a war, and Yaakov davened, and Yaakov used his sword, and blah, 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 and then he took Shechem. What? No, he says, Betzloti ve'bebauti, yafeh, which is also an interesting thing. But now, why I brought that, this was just like a mamash simple one. Almost every midrash, almost, if you look deep, you will find a connection. Sometimes the connection is pretty clear, sometimes the connection is not that clear, sometimes the connection is very, I will call it a very creative one, but still there is something there, mostly, mamash mostly, not all the time, but mostly. Okay, so now we didn't finish with Rabbi Yosef Kara, שאין לנו מידה טובה במקרא יותר מפשוטו. You cannot find any measure in learning Tanakh besides what? The best one is פשט. וכן שלמה מלך ישראל אומר, הט אוזנך לדברי חכמים ולבך תשית לדעתי. ופתרון, אף על פי שמצווה עליך לשמוע דברי חכמים, even though you are commanded to listen to what the rabbis tells you, לבך תשית לדעתי, לגופו של דבר. לדעתם לא נאמר, אלא לדעתי, to my own opinion, which means even though I need to submit myself to the rabbis, I cannot lose my own independent thinking. Which is what? The pshat. Look. Okay, leave it. רבי יוסף קרא הדגיש איפה את חשיבות לימוד הפשט מתוך רצון להבין את דבר השם. The לימוד הפשט was not just to say how smart I am, it's to understand what God wants for me. Look, this is, I don't know, it's a philosophical question. When Hashem wrote the Torah, when he told Moshe what to write, did he write it for us to understand it without all those books here? Or he, in a way, he wrote it with the understanding that what? That we will follow all the, so, but what did they do before Rashi came about? Like what Jews did in the 6th century, 7th century, 8th century, 9th century, 10th century, until Rashi wrote all these perushim on the Chumash. They understood it the way they understood it, right? Not better or worse or different than, I mean, definitely different than us. Okay. רבי יוסף קרא מדגיש איפה את חשיבות לימוד הפשט מתוך רצון להבין דבר השם, גם במקומות שבהם המדרש הולך בכיוונים אחרים. Even though sometimes the midrash can go in different directions, he stuck to what? To the pshat. מפרשי המקרא הקלאסיים, the classical commentators, like רשב"ם, רבי אברהם אבן עזרא, רמב"ן, נחמנדיז, רד"ק, הרבו לעסוק בפשוטו של מקרא. They extensively dealt with פשוטו של מקרא, תוך הבחנה בין המדרש לבין הפשט. They made a distinction, and you can see, by the way, Rabbeinu Bachye, Ibn Pakuda, who was a Talmid of the Ramban, you can see in his Perush, על דרך הפשט, על דרך המדרש, על דרך הקבלה. Mamash is doing that, is dividing it to parts, and he says to you, Pshat, Midrash, Kabbalah. Or Chaim many times does the same thing. Ramban does the same thing. Al Dvar HaPshat, Al Derech HaPshat, HaMidrash, HaKabbalah. Or Al Derech HaSod, or Al Derech HaEmet. It's all the same. So then he says, Ra'ava כבר ציין בהקדמתו לתורה, the Ibn Ezra already mentioned in his introduction to the Torah, ובעבור הדרש דרך הפשט לא שרה. Which means what? Because there are midrashim, does not mean that what? That the pshat is gone. By the way, who wrote the midrashim? He might be involved, but he didn't write them. What centuries? So we know. 5th, 6th century. No. 5th, 6th century. That was Bereshit Rabbah, Vayikra Rabbah, maybe Eicha Rabbah. It's not all the Rabbah were not composed at the same time. Okay, some of them were composed in the 10th century, and then there are other midrashim, the Tanchuma, Yalkut Shimoni, all of them. We're talking about until the 11th century, so that's prior to Rashi, prior to the Ibn Ezra. Maybe there is one midrash that was in the 12th century, maybe. But the idea is what? The one. Lekach Tov and Sechet Tov are very late midrashim. So the thing is that you see that Rashi, Ibn Ezra, they contradict what was said before them. It says, זה שיש midrash, the fact that there is a midrash does not mean that what? That the pshat is gone. כי 70 פנים לתורה. 70 faces to the Torah, which means 70 layers, 70 multiple ways to learn Torah. ואילו רמב"ן בלמעלה מ-150 מקומות בפירושו מביא לצד המדרש פירוש על דרך הפשט. 150 times the Ramban in his commentary on the Torah says what? This is what the Midrash says, but there is a pshat. So it's not one time, it's not 10 times, it's not 15 times, it's 150 times. Which means it's a lot. Which means he was able to live with what? This is my opinion, the simple understanding of the pshat. And I also bring you the Midrash. The Midrash has perhaps a different goal, different purpose. Okay. And then he says,
What about Rashi with Chavi and Hashli?
Rashi and?
Rashi on Chavi. Doesn't he say to be Lati?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not Pshat.
No, ממש לא.
So Rashi goes away from the Pshat.
Yeah. Rashi as a comment, his commentary on the Torah is mostly not pshat.
Oh,
Mostly not pshat. Yeah. In Gemara, it's exactly the opposite. In Gemara is the pshat. Rashi on the Gemara. What did I say? Rashi, no, it's not in the Gemara. Rashi on the Gemara. Oh, so what's the alternative to the Gemara? Dialectica. Whatever it is. Dialectic. Thank you. Yeah. To bring another source, to contradict it, and to find the distinction. Mostly, Rashi will not do that too much. He will try to understand what's the pshat in this sugya, even though there could be another sugya next page that will contradict it. So then he says, דרך זו הוסיפה וליוותה את המפרשים גם בדורות מאוחרים יותר מהברבנאל ועד מלבים. מפרשים אלו הורו דרך לדורות שעל פיה יש לבחון את הכתוב בדרך הגיונית ככל שניתן על מנת להגיע להבנת דבר השם המתבטא בדרך הפשט. He says, אברבנאל, מלבים, and many others did the same thing. They tried to understand the pshat. כדברי תוספות יום טוב, I think it's רבי יום טוב הלר, תוספות יום טוב, שהרשות נתונה לפרש במקראות כאשר איננו הרואות חיבורי הפירושים שמאימות הגמרא. תוספות יום טוב says that there is a permission to interpret the narrative the way we see them. Now, so I'm going to use the same critical analysis that we did to Rav Avinel here too. You basically, what does he do? He basically quoted other parshanim that says you have the legitimacy of doing your own pshat and everything. But still, there is a major difference. And the major difference is that, which he might deal with that maybe later, but if I stop here, because we will have mincha in a few minutes, but there is a major difference between the time of the Ramban and our time. In the Ramban's time, I can assure you that not too many Jews not only learned it, didn't even read it. No, they knew how to read. They knew how to read and write, but they didn't have time to read Tanakh. Tanakh was not taught so much. It was mostly Gemara v'halacha. We have mefarshim on Tanakh, on Torah for sure. When it comes to Nach, there is a major drop. Open Mikraot Gdolot on Chumash and open Mikraot Gdolot on Nach. That's one. Second, when we talk about Limut Tanakh, we are talking about now the masses. People read Tanakh all over the place. And the danger that we can have if we encourage Pshat is that if you come with a total different perspective on life and stories, and you read Tanakh with those eyes, you can come to conclusions which are not favorable to Tanakh. If I'm, for example, and I'm not, God forbid, dismissing or diminishing, but I'm just saying, let's say I'm a professor for literature. So I come obviously with a load of what? Of literature tools of how do I read shira, poetry? How do I read the story, right? So I look at the Torah, not as a holy divine book necessarily, but rather as what? a book of poetry or whatever. So now, me, a religious person, I can take some fundamentals and implement them through my world, which is a world of Torah. But for him or her, it will be what? A different world, which can lead to some conclusions which are not exactly great. So the criticism that we have here is, yes, it's true. Ramban and Rashbam and Ibn Ezra and Malbim and the Netziv many times, okay? Sure, for sure. Try to understand just the narrative, but did they encourage their congregants to do so? Or it was only among what? Just those rabbis, okay? Or when the Ramban says, here you are, you have Pshat, Midrash, and Derech HaSod. Maybe he just says, okay, this is the Pshat, and from now on, that's the Pshat V'Gamam. Meaning, it's hard to know. The fact that they did it does not mean what? That everyone can do. So this is my criticism on it, or criticism. This is just a note to have in mind that even with what he said, for now, we have some kind of issues. We will continue Bezrat Hashem next week. I will highly suggest, if you do have one, keep it.